Ready when you are on.
All right. So welcome everyone. Um, Today we are hosting another core unit launch pod, and we are in session number 7. My name is Juan, and I have the pleasure of having here Mr. David Utrobin, um, potentially from New York, if he hasn't moved yet, and he will be telling us everything about governance, communications, core unit, and how he plans to bring more, more. I'm out of words, David. So I'll need your help on this one. I'll
Fair
just
enough.
I'll
Fair
just
enough.
leave it
Fair
to you.
enough. More
If you want
support.
to tell us who
More
you are.
support. Yeah, sure. I'll grab it. But our core unit is really about bringing support to MakerDAO on the communication side, and I'll get into what that means. But let me just briefly introduce myself. My name is David Utrobin, and actually I have a slide for myself. So let me actually just share my screen because I did prepare a little bit of a deck that I could talk through. Uh, and so yeah, let's do that. Also, I am more nervous for this call than any other call I've ever been on. So, whew, all right, yeah, whew, good. Just gotta slap my cheek a little bit. All right, hey everybody, happy Monday morning. I hope you all had a fine weekend. Today I'm going to be talking about governance communications, and the title didn't always come across as very straightforward to the community, and I think that's because um, not a lot of people really dive into what it means for organizations to communicate generally, and in academia they usually take this field and they call it corporate communications or organizational communications. And that really is kind of what governance communications is trying to do. But before I get more deeply into the actual meat of the subject, let me just quickly introduce myself. Sorry, before I introduce myself, I just want to make sure that everybody here knows what they're in for. So by the end of this presentation, I hope you all understand what the vision for governance communications is, what the value for this kind of dedicated team is, where we are in the actual process of forming our core unit, and then lastly, kind of what we need, which is really just feedback from all of you. And so, yeah, who am I? So I am David Utrobin, David Utro, also known. That's like my username everywhere. I've been a MakerDAO community member since early 2017. I wrote a few articles, got me noticed by Richard Brown, and he hired me as a community development lead at the foundation. And I've been working here since November of 2018. I've worked on several different things. Many of you might not have known. I've worked on various documentation projects, including the original FAQs for single collateral DAI and multi-collateral DAI. I ran a meetup grants program that we're actually in the process of sunsetting right now. Uh, I created and ran a summary team for doing meeting minutes on public calls. I've run the community call for about 2 years. And lastly, I've done a ton of work consulting CDIPs and other working groups that resulted out of community development. I'm also an MKR holder and active voter. I have a degree in corporate communications from Baruch College here, actually in New York. And just some of my previous work experience, I did executive assistant work and administration work at Baruch College, as well as operations management for an e-commerce startup for a couple of years following my degree. And so who are we actually? So governance communications isn't all just my idea. It's actually currently Artem Gordon, who is our quality assurance person for the call summaries, as well as Tim Black, who works on Maker Relay and the community development portal, as well as a number of part-time contributors from other core units. Some key people who definitely helped us with our vision are, Jerry, um, Seth from the content production core units, and generally speaking, a lot of people from the community. So let me talk a little bit about let me talk a little bit about our start. So GovCom started as a working group. Our task was to explore what organizational communications looks like at MakerDAO, and our projects, which emerged out of natural informational needs at the DAO, included Maker Relay, snippets, public call summaries, and also facilitating the Reddit moderation. Uh, and so, you know, what are some of the general truths that we kind of understand and have learned so far? Orgs are as good as their communications. High communication standards attract new stakeholders and inspire trust. Uh, you know, at MakerDAO, everybody's also a public stakeholder. There are no internal private groups, so to speak. If things happen, they happen very publicly. Uh, Accessible and accurate information is very valuable. Inaccuracies cost a lot sometimes. Uh, and then coordination is needed no matter how decentralized we get. Uh, and so uh, and so those are kind of just some lessons that we learned out of the working group so far. Uh, and more generally speaking, to give a an overview of what actually, sorry for flipping through the slides, but to give an overview of what communications actually is in an organization, we've broken it down into kind of three buckets. So there's primarily marketing, which promotes products and services, builds and retains customers. There's public relations, which is the strategy around public perception. Uh, Often that department deals with media relations. And then lastly, which is the field that we're primarily concerned with, is organizational communications. And these are, day-to-day needs, key for functioning well. And so, what do organizational communications look like? Well, I bucketed them out into four different categories. So, there's informational resources, which are different things that various stakeholders rely on. They're the public calendar, they're the meeting minutes, they're the core unit updates, they're the monthly or quarterly reports, they're various information dashboards. All of these are very good for stakeholders. Um, there's various tools as well, alerts and notification systems, MIPS processes that stakeholders can use to, affect change. Platforms that we all mutually use, like Rocket Chat, the forum, and then there's the component of relationships. There's working relationships throughout the DAO, as well as with the stakeholders beyond the DAO. Uh, there's also importance behind actually tracking those relationships through tools like voter registry and other stakeholder registries. And then it's our practices, right? It's our crisis communications, it's our engagement, it's our standards for the information we share, and all of these, culminate in the general quality of MakerDAO as a public organization. And so, I actually, before I move on to the rest of the slides, and I realize these are actually a little bit missized, but I wanted to quickly go over what MakerDAO actually looks like from a stakeholder perspective, just to put into perspective how many people our protocol actually, well, how many people actually depend on our protocol. So I kind of broke it down into three slides. This internal circle, you can consider internal stakeholders. These are stakeholders that are kind of key and closest to the information. And then there's external stakeholders. These are also dependents, people who are affected by changes at MakerDAO, but are a little bit further away from those informational sources that internal stakeholders are, have access to. And the way I sliced it up is there's MakerDAO, which is ultimately governed by the voters. Then there's internal operations, which are primarily core units. Then there's external operations, which there's, auction participants, real world asset providers, other collateral partners. Then there's our users, which includes not just DAI users, Vault users, Oracle data users, but also any integrators or partners that are connected to the Maker protocol. And then there's the general public, um, which is actually the media, it's acquirable talent, it's potential customers and stakeholders, and it's policymakers or regulators. So that's kind of like the outer onion. Uh, and really, this is what our stakeholder map looks like. Uh, and so a lot of the decisions that voters, core units, and partners make together as a DAO affect these outer circles in various ways. And organizational communications really is not just how this internal stakeholder group works, although that is a really, really big part of it. And in traditional companies, that is actually what their communications departments are primarily focused on. It's that internal communication side of it. But for MakerDAO, because we are very much a public organization by nature, our organizational communications are way further reaching, and we are responsible, very similar to like a public, SEC regulated company, to do outreach and make sure our communications are top notch, and we're able to actually reach all the stakeholders that we need to, and have a connection to this greater stakeholder map that exists. Uh, and so yeah, let me just pause there, get back to the slide where I'm supposed to be at, and give it a second for any like comments or questions. I'm happy to take a pause here just for a sec before I launch into the state of things. All right, cool. You wanted to say something, Juan?
No, I was going to ask if someone had any questions, but I think lots of the people here have been working with you
Yeah,
and yeah, providing feedback already. So we pretty much know what this is about.
cool, cool. Uh,
Mm.
and also just really quickly about the value of organizational communications, because I realized I left this actually off the slide. But good organizational communications, they make an organization more efficient. People don't have to hunt for the information they need. They don't have to. They kind of know where to access everything. That's the mark of a really, really great infrastructure. It also makes an organization way more responsive. It makes an organization way more in sync. It de-silos information, which is, I know, was a huge priority at the foundation, at least last year or a year or two ago. It makes an organization more prepared, and ultimately, it makes the organization more attractive, not just for more voters to come in, but for more stakeholders generally, more partners, more people willing to use vaults, more people willing to use DAI. In general, if we can get this core competency right, it really flourishes, and has lasting effects. Um, and just ask yourself, as an investor, would you want to put your money in a organization that has really, really great communications practices and standards, and or do you want to put money into one that doesn't? Obviously it might be a gamble, but fundamentally you want the one that's a little bit better, right? But either way, I digress. So let me talk a little bit about the state of things. So obviously, as many of you might know, we're currently in a state of transition. So the Maker protocol hasn't always been uh, a DAO, right? Like it didn't start as a fully decentralized protocol. It actually started with a group of people building it. They formed into a foundation to further bootstrap the protocol. Uh, and over the course of the last basically 2 or 3 years, we've seen an organic community develop around the actual protocol, while the foundation and the builders and the people that have been bootstrapping it are slowly winding down. The foundation side, and transitioning to actually doing decentralized work and getting funding directly from the protocol. So a lot of teams from the foundation, for example, are slowly moving, selectively moving into being actually core units that are independently funded, independently audited by MakerDAO, and independently voted on, right? So yeah, we're in this state of transition, and our current organizational communications are decent, and they're growing in a grassroots way in line with the needs of the DAO. However, there's a huge potential to raise the bar. Uh, and currently, a lot of the work that happens to support organizational communications are actually ComDev compensated projects. Uh, and a lot of these projects are lacking of a DAO funded dedicated team, um, that they can all kind of umbrella under the scope of. Uh, and so, yeah, that's kind of the state of things. Also, a few things worth noting. Maker voters are the executive decision makers here. There is typically in a traditional company, there's a board of directors and a C-suite of executives, and there is a whole line of accountability uh, and information requirements, and like kind of active management almost. Uh, Whereas at MakerDAO, that's a little bit different, right? We have a group of executive level pseudonymous voters, a headless organization, right? Core units have facilitators, but the Maker protocol as a whole doesn't have a CEO or a COO or a CTO. Uh, and generally speaking, we are a public organization with many, many, many stakeholders and dependents. So these are kind of just the state of things to consider. And so a lot of confusion has been, I've noticed a lot of confusion in the forums around the different communication teams that are being proposed. Uh, One of the main pieces of feedback was around overlap. And I kind of wanted to just, you know, put this slide out there to give you all an understanding of what teams are out there or are being proposed right now, and what their functions are. So before I talked a little bit about how you can divide an organization's communication into marketing, PR, and organizational comms. Uh, and in some way we are almost doing that. So we have content production, which is a generalized content team. We have strategic marcoms, which is a global marketing and a PR team, according to the mandate. And then we have ourselves, the governance communications team, which deals with organizational comms execution and also advisory. Um, yeah. And so now let me get into kind of the concrete of what it is that GovComms does. So I divided it into these three simple mandate sentences. We facilitate and improve on the basics. So what are the basics, you might ask? They're emergency communications, make a relay, the public calendar, various public calls, meeting minutes, additional reports that our DAO could produce, the organizational chart, and then various stakeholder registries. These are what we judge to be foundational, kind of important elements of organizational communications at Maker. And so that's one piece. The next piece is assessing and advising MakerDAO. So we hope to actually evaluate our organizational comms on the whole. We want to advise core units, delegates, and others on best practices and standards around information sharing. And we also want to work with stakeholders on identifying those gaps, which in other words is we also engage and maintain relationships with stakeholders. So not only do we have a voter registry, but we, for taking MKR voters, for example, not only do we have the voter registry for them, but we would also do outreach and basically, user outreach projects that are specific to improving our offerings and improving our practices as an org. We intend to do the same with inter-DAO actors, delegates at MakerDAO, and also just generally speaking, off-chain governance participants. And some of our general objectives are we want to create a better reading experience for voters and stakeholders. We want to give issues and stakeholders a platform. So we want to help voices and views get heard. We want to bring out groups inward. We have external stakeholders and we want to make them more welcome and privy to our communications infrastructure. We want to connect them all. We want to connect everybody. We want to make sure that there are no gaps. And lastly, we want to focus on efficiency. So standard setting, consistency, access and removal of unnecessary comms. And generally speaking, where we are in this entire process, sorry, let me exit here. That's pretty much it for the deck that I have. But where we are in this entire process is we are currently in the process of revising our mandate, packaging all of this into a few really easy to understand buckets. And the main thing to understand is that MakerDAO is a rapidly growing protocol, and the sands are somewhat shifting under our feet. It has been pretty hard to create this mandate without either stepping on somebody's toes or needing more clarification or just understanding the ways that we work with other core units. And so we really are at the moment in the formation phase. We're looking for validation. We're looking for to solidify this idea before we move forward, before we try to attract more people to work with us. And so with that being said, that's it for my deck, and I want to open it up to conversation because I think that that's probably the most valuable thing that we could do in this call.
Hey, David, nice presentation there.
Thanks.
I have a question with regards to public communications. Does your team, do you guys envision working with the, I don't know what to call it, legal core unit or general counsel core unit when it comes to putting out, public disclosures, or is that something that the communications team is going to take on their own and um, as fit?
Yeah. So generally speaking, I still have yet to understand what the current legal core unit that's being formed is actually going to cover. If they're able to give us counsel on, what disclaimers we need, what information we probably shouldn't put out there, et cetera, that would be really great. That would be a service we would happily uh, subscribe to and work with them on. Uh, Generally speaking, the legal side of communications I have not touched internally at our core unit, just because I'm waiting to see what that legal core unit is going to look like.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when it comes to, this is just hypothetical, when it comes to, say, if regulation comes into fruition one day, and say your team has to file something similar to what public companies do, which is a 10K. If you guys had to file something crazy like that in the future, is that something you guys would handle? Or is that something like, I guess the legal team has to handle? They have to hire like some kind of like assistant counsel or something. Do you have any thoughts on that
Yeah,
by any
sure.
chance?
So no matter what, if we are approached with a request to, fill out some official documentation from a government agency, we will definitely run that by whatever legal team is available or present, and we will not do it kind of secretly. We're gonna explain to the community what's being requested of us, what it entails. I personally don't really know what the 10K form is fully about. Uh, but generally speaking, yeah, we wouldn't do it in a vacuum. We would definitely work with uh, the org publicly, and with the key people that can help us to do whatever we can. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what a 10K is either, so you got me there. But so this weekend, right, we had this crazy, it was Saturday night here in locally in the East Coast. When it comes to emergency response, how would your team handle something like what happened on Saturday night Eastern time? I guess early morning in Europe. That big sell-off. Is that something I guess that the emergency portion of your core unit would come out and say, "Hey, so and so number of votes got liquidated, blah blah blah. Everything looks good." You know,
Sure. So with regards to emergency communications, so we've been working actually with GovAlpha to define what are the emergencies that we would be responding to and what that response would entail. So something like a market sell-off isn't an emergency. Uh, Rather, if the market sell-off triggered something like a Black Thursday event where liquidations wasn't working properly, that is somewhere where we would step in and help. And what that looks like for our team is this. So GovAlpha and the various technical core units, they all have to coordinate around solutions, decisions, what's happening, et cetera, et cetera. What our core unit would do is we would support them on the communication side. So at the moment there isn't a published MIP, but it's actually in draft. But whenever an emergency happens, there's a few things that have to happen. So there's going to be a public but locked forum thread for mandated actors and teams that are involved with the emergency that can post verified information. And then there is a parallel discussion thread that's open to the public. And also there's some other stuff that happens like rocket chat channel for coordinations across core units and a handful of other things. But the main thing we would be doing is we would be managing that discussion thread. We would be managing that updates thread. So we would be aiding not just in the coordination, but also we would gather what information is there in the discussion thread to identify gaps, identify other impact that the team hasn't spotted. Um, and generally speaking, we're support. So we don't own the whole thing. We're just helping in the coordination of it.
got it. So I guess your team wouldn't get on Twitter and say, "Hey, this is just a small example of what happened this Saturday night here locally." I think the OSM was delayed and it wasn't changing, and Nick had to tweak it a bit and get it going, right? Because the price wasn't updating.
Yeah.
So I guess that's something you guys wouldn't get on Twitter right in the middle of the night and say, "Hey, we're tweaking the OSM 1 hour delay, we'll let you know when it's back up and running. That's
Yeah.
something your team doesn't do or does do. That's I'm just trying to get.
So like in an event like that, the main party there would be the people who have the relationships and the connections with whoever the stakeholder is. So if there's a problem with the OSM, for example, we know that Nick and the Oracle team, soon to be Oracle core unit, he has access contact to all the possible stakeholders. So he would be able to launch that first line of proactive communications. But then, generally speaking, if the problem is longer lasting, lasts longer than a couple days, uh, if there needs to be some more broad stakeholder awareness, we would help in various ways. Not only would we report it on Maker Relay, but we would also work with other core units to actually get that word out there. Also, at the moment, we don't have a lot of the infrastructure that we're proposing. For example, we don't have, uh, you know, cross core unit registries of like all the integrators, right? I'm sure the integrations core unit has a list of all the integrators. Uh, but to share that kind of list with our core unit, yes, we would definitely take advantage and try to build up a way to not just notify stakeholders, but also engage with them over the long term. But I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, definitely, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for answering my
Sure.
questions.
Sure,
Thanks.
sure.
Dave, maybe to follow a little bit on what Frank is doing. Obviously, this core unit is supporting other core units, and
Yes.
that's great. Is there anything that you would say this we own and it's only our core unit that will do it, kind of like in vacuum, or pretty much everything is a bit cross-functional?
I would say that. So yeah, it's been one of the challenges that I've had over the last like basically month or two in trying to form the mandate for this core unit is understanding what the overlap is. And so uh for example, like one thing that we might fully own, to answer your question directly, is Maker Relay, right? We control Maker Relay, and our job as a core unit is to aggregate all the updates, align them in in a format, make it as reader friendly as possible, make sure the information that's there is complete, verified, um, etc., etc. So like that's one thing, but that's not. We hope to also advise on what core units are putting out in terms of reports. So let's say real world finance, or eventually some accounting core unit puts out the Maker financials. We want to work with that core unit not just on like actually getting exposure for that report, whether it's publishing it as a part of the Maker Relay or publishing it on the community blog or a blog, whatever it might be, will be there to advise at a minimum, but definitely host and proactively produce as a maximum. But it really depends on what the report is, what the output is. So maybe some things like Maker Relay we own, but other things we advise on, other things we barely even touch because the core unit is doing it perfectly.
Thank you for your presentation, David. Oh, did you want to follow up one?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
One question I had is it's coming from my feedback that I left on your post a while back. I'm
Yeah,
glad
sure.
to see that you've added the voter engagement part into your mandate. And so I would love to hear more about it, whether you're planning any specific actions on this subject, or if it's still in the planning phase. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So it's definitely still in the planning phase, and actually, huge credit to you, Ellie. You've done a ton, actually a couple of projects in the last 2 months with regards to outreach to voters. So you actually took on the voter registry, and you're helping to make it a more complete registry. And also, you've been working with a few people in the community on Project Compass, which aims to kind of bring the organization under one kind of cohesive mandate and like goal, right? Uh, so those kinds of projects we definitely would see as something that could belong to our scope. Obviously, other core units are going to do their own stakeholder engagement projects, so I'm totally not surprised and not off put that GovAlpha is doing this kind of work. Uh, so yeah, I hope that kind of answers it, but we would be doing engagement here's one example. We would be doing engagement around whether the information in the reports that we put out are enough. What information is missing? What do you expect to see? Like what kind, so that's one side of it, polling MKR voters on what information they are missing or want more of. But yeah, generally speaking, there's a lot that you can engage voters with. So it really depends. And it also depends on what other active projects other core units are doing.
Thank you. And in terms of reaching out to, say, a wider base of voters, are you planning on opening any new channels, or are you sticking to the existing ones?
At the moment, we're sticking to the existing ones. As for new voters and new projects, we want to think about ways that we could, or we want to think about potential projects we can support that might be technical solutions for voters to be able to communicate better. I know one huge request for the last few years, for example, has been a sign only. You have to be an MKR holder to be able to chat in some specific room. Basically having verified MKR communications like that. That would be really good. And there's, I'm sure, a technical solution in the future for that. And we definitely see our core unit as potentially facilitating such a solution. But at the moment, yeah, we're launching with kind of what we have in terms of active projects right now. And then over this first 3 months, assuming we get voted in, we would create a more medium-term roadmap, and we would expand and see how else we can really start tackling our scope.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, actually, I had a question about the roadmap, David. I was wondering if you had like a very high level plan that you were thinking about sharing it, or you were going more like, no, let's see if we get voted, and if the DAO wants us to do the job, we'll start
Yeah.
working on it.
Yeah, my goal is definitely to have as much information up front before people vote on us as possible. It's actually one of the reasons I've been considering even extending our RFC an additional month, just so that I could have a bit more I'm going to have more bandwidth this coming month, and so I could have a lot more coming into it to help voters understand what it is they're voting on and what our roadmap is. And part of the mandate revision does include a 3 to 6 month roadmap. Uh, I don't really like. I have an infographic, but it's a little bit messy. So yeah, I'm not super ready to share that. But in general, it could look like it's going to look like this. It's going to look like all the things that we're currently doing. Make a relay. We would do the public calls. We would facilitate Reddit moderation as we do. We would expand meeting minutes to all public calls. We'd continue doing the calendar. That's all kind of the default. But what we are looking at in terms of our roadmap is we want to do stakeholder registries. We want to do we want to help with press relations, for example, at least facilitate a venue for it, which we're in the process of doing. We want to do an advisory role. We want to rate core unit communications potentially. So there's like a lot of potential things that we could do. So it's hard to say that we're definitely going to do them in the roadmap. I just am setting my sights, setting my vision, and as we grow into it, we're going to be very public and very clear about what it is we're adding to our roadmap.
That's good. Maybe a potential way of approaching it would be to set different experiments with OKRs and say, if we reach this many viewers for this thing, we can keep doing it. Otherwise, we'll reiterate and try something else.
Yeah, totally. And also, I know the Sustainable Ecosystem Scaling Core Unit has a really great framework for incubating these kinds of pilot projects, and so we definitely envision potentially even working with that core unit doing that.
Yeah, I didn't want to I don't know take over your call and start
No,
chilling
it's okay.
other core units, but on Friday the 30th, Andy's going to give a workshop on rituals and how to set OKRs for core units. So
Oh, sweet.
everyone is welcome to join. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll definitely be there for that. But generally speaking, where we are in the process is we have a vision. We've identified like a very clear need for the DAO. Uh, what I'm looking for is a bit more talent. So I am looking for at least another full-time person who can partner with me on this. I am a young communications professional, but MakerDAO is a multi-billion-dollar TVL organization. It's public. I would really, really love if anybody could put me together with, a more seasoned, experienced communications professional. I think MakerDAO could really benefit from that. This team could really benefit from that. And in general, I'm very open to doing this right. So if anybody here has connections and wants to put me in touch, has any ideas on how we can even improve this mandate, structure it better, uh, please reach out to me. I'm very open to that.
That's awesome. I had a question just kind of in terms of you as the facilitator, David. Just
Sure.
What, I guess, do you like have a particular philosophy, or like how do you see yourself operating and running this core unit in terms of like growing it for the future and kind of keeping it on track?
Yeah, sure. So generally speaking, um, I have been around MakerDAO for quite a while. I'm very well connected to all the individuals that make it up, both on the foundation side and the DAO side. Um, I have a vision for what the team should consist of, and since I've been drafting kind of the structure of it, as a facilitator, yeah, I mean it's kind of the standard stuff, right? You set a vision, you set your goals, you set people to own the different components of what your team is responsible for, uh, and really you manage it, right? You do your one-on-ones, you do your stand-ups, you do your OKRs, you make sure tracking is in place for everything. Uh, so generally speaking, yeah, all of those things are definitely a part of, yeah, the way that I would be running this core unit. We would also be you know looking to be in line with what the standards are for core unit transparency. So we would also do self-reporting. uh, I hope to, well, not hope, I intend to put out a quarterly report on the progress of our team, what we're doing, where we're going, uh, details of what things have changed. I hope that kind of answers the question, but yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I know it's hard at the beginning. I was just thinking in particular, like the other day, you set up the like media communications channel framework, and
Yep.
that just kind of came out of, hey, we got someone who wants to talk about something. We need a framework, and then you kind of got to spring into action.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, that's another part about being a facilitator. It's it's to what you're saying. It's being proactive and really jumping on opportunities when they arise. So yeah, like we've been talking about how to do media relations as a DAO for a while, and I think in traditional companies like PR will have some point person to do press relations, but at MakerDAO it's a little bit different. Like we can set up a point person for sure, uh, but alternatively we're trying this thing, and I'm saying this for the people in the call that might not know. We're trying this thing where we're doing a permissioned category in the forum, where members of the media can reach out to me. They can get put on the media list, and they'll have access to posting questions. And there's some guidelines there. And the people who can respond are only trust level 3 forum participants. So these are senior community members, core unit facilitators, other mandated actors. Uh, and so we're trying this model, and it's not really something that I could find that anybody else is doing, but at a minimum, yeah, being a facilitator is definitely jumping on lowest hanging fruit and opportunity when you can. So yeah, when me and Long set it up, it was like bound to happen. We both knew what the idea was, and yeah, we just did it.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have two. One is I really like the Maker Relate, David. Like I read it all Mondays. I find that very useful, and I would like. I don't know if it's possible, but it will be amazing if you could include information from other DAOs. Like if other DAOs are talking about DAI, about Maker, if we have to be aware of something, that will be super, super awesome. I don't know if you have considered that. And the other thing is that last week we had this little issue with Coinbase custody. So the investors or the maker holders that had MKR in Coinbase custody, they couldn't vote. So it will be great also if your core unit could like manage these third parties who are involved in the process of voting, because, well, I guess like communicating is related to like different things, not just like telling everyone what's happening, but also like anticipating to these kind of events. So if we are close to a vote, to a date where everyone has to vote, like just like talk with Coinbase custody or other custody solutions to see if their system is working well and if we can help them in some way. So that's my suggestion for your core unit.
Yeah, thank you. And so definitely, so to the first point about inter-DAO relationships and news. So we've definitely thought about how we can incorporate that. And I think, when we look at the stakeholder map, one thing that I now realize is missing from my version is that, outside or even semi outside circle, the public and the users, uh, somewhere there is also neighboring protocols. And you're right, they definitely do carry news for Maker that might affect, you know, various internal stakeholder decisions, right? Uh, and so, yeah, our intention is to have those relationships. It starts with a registry, at least, right? It starts with just a list of who's who, uh, and then it goes into more like how do we keep each other notified? Not just them, us, but also the other way around. So I don't know, like it's hard to talk specifics when you're being general, but generally speaking, yes, that is definitely something that's on our mandate. um, Likewise, like with Maker Relay and being more uh, descriptive about various things, we do intend not just to do everything ourselves out of Maker Relay. For example, we will be working with other core units, for example, content production. So if there's somebody from content production that really specializes in the DIPEG analysis, we would totally add that kind of stuff to the Maker Relay and more. But yeah, digressing, going back to your point, yes, we definitely want to do engagement with intra-DAO parties. And then the second thing that you mentioned was around talking with people that are doing custody and really are involved, or more generally speaking, you're talking about obstacles to voters, right? And how do we try to minimize those, or
Yes,
lobby partners to make voting
yes,
accessible and that kind of stuff, right?
exactly. Like this was just an example. Like I was like following the voting last week because of the growth core unit, and I find out that like one of the maker investors couldn't vote because he has all his MKR in Coinbase custody.
Right.
So I thought like, okay, so we have to like work around everything that could be a problem for people who want to vote.
Agreed. It's also a group effort, right? And it's also ultimately a decision of Coinbase custody. Like as much as we wish that VCs would just self custody and vote with everything, they have risk parameters, right? And that's why people use stuff like Coinbase custody. But even from Coinbase custody's perspective, our governance contract is soon getting a revision. The way that delegated voting will work is not even in effect yet, right? It's coming. So it is, at least at this particular moment in time, a little difficult to lobby given the upcoming changes and the upcoming sand shifting under their feet. But eventually, yeah, we definitely, well, it's interesting because there's two ways to do it, right? There's either you write something as a community and you kind of put it out there in our official comms, or you put it to a vote, like basically similar to what IMEO did with the A16Z letter, and you have something a lot more explicit from voters, which carries a lot more weight, I would say. So there's different ways of actually getting that message across to Coinbase and others like them. And generally speaking, we should be advocating that not just we advocate, but also that MKR voters themselves that are in those custody solutions advocate, because I think those are the best positions people to really make that argument to Coinbase. Like, hey, you're holding 5,000 of my MKR. I want to vote and I need it to be still be in custody. Can you facilitate this for me? If not, I'm going to a different custody solution. So I think naturally it's going to happen, and definitely being an advocate for removing those barriers is important. The role that governance communications will play in all of that will definitely be a role of support, potential facilitation. Yeah, I hope that kind of encapsulates the whole picture.
Hey,
Great,
David,
thank you.
sorry, Nadia. So David, following up on that, Nadia's point there, how do you envision your work with delegators? That's going to be something that's going to soon take off, I hope. And
Yeah, totally. So I've envisioned kind of two pieces to this. So one of them is like we definitely want a page somewhere, whether it's on the community development portal or even just a dedicated place in the forums, but we want like profiles of our delegates. So we want to know who they are, what their views on, where they lean, a history of what they've done. So we hope to work with delegates to produce those kinds of informational resources about themselves. That's one. And then the other part of it is giving delegates the microphone or the platform when talking about issues. So if there's an issue and there's three good solutions and there's three delegates fighting for all those solutions, we want to be able to tell the story of what the trade-offs are, what the conversation is, and so yeah, giving delegates the ability to really have their views heard is important. And so yeah, we're going to be working with pretty much the entire DAO to get that piece right as well.
I guess one day you see yourself reporting why, 5 delegators went one way and 7 went the other way, and kind of
Exactly, yeah.
they can kind of communicate through you and kind of push their narrative to the left or to the right. I don't know. I'm not trying to make
Well,
it too
so
political.
yeah, I hear you. I hear you. So like, and generally speaking, I think maybe this wasn't super clear in our mandate yet. Not just yet because I haven't written it in, but one of our really big values is objectivity. Because we are in the middle of these communications, we don't want to steer any decision manipulatively, right? We don't want to try to make people lean one way or another. We want to present the facts first and foremost. We want to verify that the facts are the facts. And we want to share a balanced view of whatever it is that we're putting out there. So if there's an issue, we want to make sure both sides get heard, not just one side for the benefit of MCAR holders, right? But yeah, so that's one really, really big value of ours is objectivity and keeping bias as minimal as possible.
Yeah, and I saw that Artem is the full project manager. I used to have a friend who was a project manager in CULPS. I was wondering, Artem, are you going to be doing like lunch meetings once the pandemic is over and inviting stakeholders over, and not to put you on the spot?
Oh, your mic's really low. I can't hear you at all.
Can you guys hear me now better?
Yeah, you're coming in.
All right, awesome. Yeah, I'm willing to do it. I mean, I've been involved with crypto and I've been learning about blockchain, and I know David's gonna really push me through and show me the information, and I'm gonna have the time to learn, because right now I have a job, but if this gets voted in, I'm not gonna have that job. I'm gonna be full-time here, and I'm gonna do everything I can if that involves speaking with other people and collaborating. I'm gonna do all I can, 100%.
Yeah, and generally speaking, actually speaking towards the structure of the team. So at the moment, the original mandate had 2 full-time positions and a number of part-time positions, which was me as the facilitator, 1 full-time project manager, and a number of contributors that are already working on stuff. Uh, and I think that it's safe to say that that's not the complete list. We are looking for somebody who has a bit more wisdom than both myself, Artem, and anybody, everybody in the team, who really can help us make this like top tier. Uh, One thing that I'm really cognizant of is not doing a half-assed job. We want the right people. We could afford the right people. And Artem is really a great candidate because he's been working on the governance call summary team for the better part of a year now. He is intimately aware of like how MakerDAO itself works, what the organization of MakerDAO looks like, uh, what the roadmap is, et cetera, et cetera. So just from an informational standpoint, Artem makes a really great candidate, as well as his previous work experience. He's one of the most competent people I've had the pleasure of working with in the past. Again, both of us are young, both of us are getting our feet wet, but I think he would make a great project manager. And generally speaking, when we do fully flesh out what this core unit does, we're going to have people really owning things and owning projects and reporting both to the facilitator, me, and to the DAO, generally speaking, through our transparency efforts.
That's cool. I hope to see you guys on CNBC or Bloomberg one of these days in the near future. Hey, why not?
I hope I'll be ready for that.
David, running the risk of making this sound like an interview, as I've
Sure.
been
No, this is
told
totally
in
an
previous
interview, by the
calls.
way.
You mentioned that you're a proactive person, or that you're trying to be a proactive person. Can you give examples? And it doesn't need to be in Maker, right? But
Yeah, sure,
ideally,
sure.
it is of situations when you were proactive and you initiated things and you make them happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one good set of examples is probably the community call. So the community call has evolved over the years. So it started off as kind of a weekly update to MKR holders and anybody who'd watch, and it quickly became apparent that that's not really a great use of the call's time. Nobody told me this. I observed this both from the views, both from people's individual kind of feedback. So I guess people told me this a little bit, and and generally speaking, I pivoted the call to include a lot more guests. The programming kind of completely changed. So that's one example of me being proactive. Another is the call summary team. So back when I was working with Richard Brown, I had a bit of bandwidth, and we were just starting the governance call back then. It was like Stephen, Rich, myself, and a few others in those calls. And one thing that I immediately started doing was the meeting minutes, because nobody was doing this. I recognized it as a need, not just for the information like at the moment, but also for historic preservation. So that's another example. I think maybe that you could also ask people that I've generally worked with uh, how proactivity is very much a part of my nature, and I'm always trying to figure out the best unspoken solutions to various problems that we deal with in all of our projects. So yeah, those are a couple of examples.
Good. Does anyone else have any questions? Maybe Amy or Seth, Anna, Tadeo.
David, thank you for your presentation. And I have a question regarding legal organization. So what are you thinking
Sure.
about incorporating? Are you going to incorporate a legal entity or not? And if yes, what are your thoughts and your needs about this?
Yeah, that's a great question, and definitely one that I've been thinking a lot about over the last month or two. So there was a handful of different options for core units, and I think that we won't be independently incorporating as far as like the plan is right now. We're actually going to be approaching Accountable, and we're going to try to set up entirely through them. That's because it makes it really easy to pay contributors both in crypto and in fiat. Uh, they connect us to a worldwide PEO organization that can handle all of the HR and etc. needs that we might have. And so yeah, that's kind of where we're leaning right now. And we are recommending at least the people who intend to work with us, if they want taxable US income, to sign up with Opolis. We definitely can work with Opolis entities, individuals, entities, and stuff like that. But as for the team itself, we're going to be setting up pretty much directly through Accountable, so we won't be incorporating.
Okay, nice. Yeah, it would be interesting to know your experience with them, how it went, and if you could share this experience with future core units.
Yeah, I certainly will, and yeah, it's definitely something that all the core units have to weigh in their own estimation. But yeah, I'll definitely give a review of my experience.
Cool, thanks.
David, regarding the timelines, do you know when you're planning on submitting this? Is it clear yet, or?
Yeah, so regarding the timelines, I am going to have the written revision posted before April 28th. I'm hoping to actually have it out by the 23rd. Our original intention was to have our core unit go through the vote in the May governance cycle, but given just the need for like a better structured or clear, I don't know, I just need to be satisfied that it's ready before I really let it go to a vote. That's the main struggle that I'm really having. But yeah, if the mandate and the revision looks really great and it has positive feedback after this coming Friday, I'm gonna allow it to go to a vote for the May cycle. Worst case scenario, it's gonna go to a vote in the June cycle.
If you're not embarrassed about your MIP, then you launched too late.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm just I'm a perfectionist. I need to make sure it's done right, and sometimes I gotta hurry up.
Where can people find you or provide feedback about
Yeah,
this?
sure. So you could provide feedback both in DMs and on the forum. Welcome. My username everywhere is David Utro, the first 4 letters of my last name, David Utro. That's on Twitter, forum, Rocket Chat, wherever. And so if you would like to see the revision, it's currently not up yet. We have our, let me actually put up the link. We have our original mandate that captures some of what I talked about during this call. But yeah, look out for that revision on that forum thread this coming Friday.
Great. And anything else you would like to say before closing the call?
Yeah, just a huge thank you to the people that have helped me think through this, have helped me shape it, have given me lots of great feedback, whether it was very straightforward or whatever. It was great. I appreciate it, and MakerDAO appreciates it, and I think that we're all growing towards something really special. And so, yeah, I hope governance communications makes sense, is a valid idea, and I hope that we can execute it well.
Sounds good. Thank you, David, and thank you everyone for coming.
Yeah, cheers, everybody. Have a good Monday.